So good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Meet the Speaker webinar. So this evening we are going to introduce you to the lovely Steve Adair, who is one of the amazing speakers at our fantastic conference, and yeah, we would just like to ask him a few questions just to get a feel for the kind of thing that he's going to be sharing and what he sees around this understanding that we're going to be sharing at the conference. So Beck, have you got some questions there, Undy? Or
yeah, so I thought I'd just start by sharing the dates of the conference.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So we're hosting a second North Devon Mental Health and Wellbeing Conference on the 14th to the 16th of November at Westward Home. And what we'll do wherever we share this recording, we'll make sure there's links so you can find out a bit more about it and obviously buy your tickets. So Steve, I think the first kind of question, it's actually something we talked about with you a little while back behind the scenes, is about obviously when we kind of say to people about coming to a conference and that kind of thing, it can sound quite daunting to come to a conference, maybe if you've not been to something like this before, and for somebody that's perhaps new to this understanding. Look, I think the question is, what would you say to someone who's perhaps a little bit nervous about attending something like this, but might be interested in coming along?
Well, thank you for having me as a guest speaker and at your conference. And I would say, it's interesting, even when I go along as a speaker, there's still a certain amount of nervousness there because we kind of taught ourselves the unknown can be a little bit scary. And it's what I said to you guys last year, that so when I came along to your conference, I'd known you a little bit, but heard a little bit what you guys were up to. But still going along and meeting other people was still a little bit kind of nerve-wracking. But I promise the moment that we got there, that all went away. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I feel it went away was because the openness that the Dare to Be You team offered to the speakers and everyone. It didn't become speakers and people who've just come along to join in. It became everyone together. Mm-hmm. And everyone was looked after. And I think what you did through the day, and as what I openly says to you on paper, I was like, this isn't going to work. And it just blew my mind how it did, because you guys led it. And that really came through, that you hadn't just thought about how do we look after the speakers, how do we look after everyone? And in return, that came back from everybody. It was there. So there was fun, there was laughter, and there was a little bit of learning along the way. So it wasn't your normal kind of conference as in, let's come along and sit down with pen and paper and really study hard. It wasn't about that at all. It's about really just recognizing truly what is inside of you. And I think having the 3 days that we did last year and this year was a beautiful amount of time for people just to really settle in to what each speaker was talking about. And then the magic of when people aren't speaking, you've got enough gaps in between that you get to hang out either on your own or with other people. And that too, really, space was created to keep people in mind for that. So nothing was really expected apart from you just turn up and just be yourself, whether that's quiet the whole 3 days or as loud as the Dare to Be You team the whole 3 days. And so for me, that's kind of what I've learned really from last year, was there was no expectation, but just come along and just be yourself. And whether that's quiet or joining in or a bit of both, it's completely up to you.
Can you tell us a little bit about, you've been teaching this understanding or sharing this understanding, or whatever word you want to put on that, for a little while now. Can you tell us some of the things that you've seen, some of the changes that you've watched people experience and some of the things, so if someone's thinking of coming to this conference, and obviously we're going to be talking about mental health and well-being, which is a huge subject at the moment. There's an awful lot out there and an awful lot of people struggle in this arena. So what would you share, what have you seen and what do you think people could hope for if they come along for these 3 days?
Gosh, what haven't I seen really is, when I first came across the principle, I really was a rebel. So I didn't want to listen because my training was in traditional psychology, psychotherapy. And I really was proud of that because of the work that I had done before. But, there was a saying that I actually had heard it, and it had such a profound feeling inside of me. And it's something along the line that you cannot suffer the past or future, as they do not exist. What you are suffering is your memory and imagination. And the amount of time and time again that I've actually seen that when people allow themselves to just come along and just be, without the expectation of, I need to improve, I need to make myself better, because that's something that I did constantly as well. So when we sit in front of people, what I really know is that when we see that thought is a state of mind, and that state of mind creates our experience, the beauty of it, it's not what we're saying to you, it's how you're hearing it. And what I'm saying is pure transformation. And I mean that in the purest sense. And what I'm saying is that, you know, when we kind of things like, we define what peace of mind is, we define what anxiety is, we define, and we live by the definition of ourselves. But what I really believe is we simply lost that sense of our own inner compass of peace of mind. And that when people start reorientating themselves without having 12 steps or 3 steps to do, that instinctual wisdom comes forth into their consciousness, into their awareness, and that's where change happens. So for me, what was great was that when I went along for the conference, the very first one I went to, I wanted bam, because I was hearing all these great things. So I was going to walk on water by the end of it. That's what I kind of thought. But really, I just got quiet. I just became more still than what I'd ever been when I used to meditate. And so it started showing me rather than me showing it. And that was something different, because I realized that that part that I said, I realized in the part it was showing me there is no suffering. So when people start saying that there is no suffering, then they give themselves the grace of opening up to their peace of mind and seeing that it's not really gone anywhere at all. It's just that we've innocently looked in the wrong direction. And for me, of having the A to Z things of how to heal people, to realize that no one needs to be healed. We're not damaged or broken. But what I think the suffering in the world is because we've invested too much in where we think we've innocently gone wrong. So what I see time and time again is people having that personal uncovering for themselves. Because this isn't a prescription of what you must do. So that's from the get-go, like when I turn up for groups or one-to-ones and say, you know, you can put your pen and paper away. It's like, sorry? You can put your pen and paper away, because what we're going to explore as a group today is something that you already are. So I can't teach you to be who you truly are. But when you start listening to different people and how they share, how they've seen, it's almost like we hypnotize ourselves and we stop hypnotizing ourselves into being a certain product of who we think we have to be. And when people wake up to that, we just really realize that all we're ever doing is, I was sitting this morning and I just finished a session with a client, and I was asking myself, what was the difference in if I would have worked with this person before? And there's a curiousness that I think we have as children, and we lose that curiousness because of life experiences. And I was just being curious with her. It didn't make sense to me, some of the things that she was saying, and nor did it have to. So I was just sitting actually being curious. But you know what I really recognized was that when I was being curious, it allowed me to trust that feeling of wisdom that I had inside of me. And inevitably, what it did is this beautiful feeling of love between the both of us, without even calling it a name, just happened to take place. And we ended up talking about Elvis and the love of Elvis by the end of that session. And that is night and day different, that if I would have tried to get to why the torture, the horror, the anxiety, or whatever was there. And we ended up having a beautiful experience of just being in that moment with one another. And what I realized, and this is what I love, and I'm sure you guys have found that, is because it isn't a prescription of steps of how to get well. life shows us time and time again the beauty of who we are. And the best that I can describe it is that when I sit like with that woman, I was like beaming like a Cheshire cat. They were beaming like a Cheshire cat. And that was nothing to do with this Elvis impersonator. We thought it kind of looked like it was that, but we were just in this feeling of having no thought, just, oh my God, he's really good. And do you think he's Elvis reincarnated? And we were just being in conversation, real conversation from the heart. And what I realized is that when we look from that place, there is a coming together of the formless and the form. And it takes us where the heart wants to flow. That's what I've seen time again with people, versus going over the pain of the past, being worried about the future, is that we have the ability to see that there is a presence of love in every single moment. And it's that present that allows us to wake up from our numbness. And I know last year, not just for myself, and even though then I had been around the principles 8 years, I know back before, in the therapy fields that I worked in, for me, that's what happened at last year's conference. There was such a presence of love that there were people just laughing, people who came with frowns, all of a sudden had the biggest big smiling faces. And all we were just doing was talking about how we're seeing life turning up. So when we know that there's nothing to learn and nowhere to get to, we can actually just, okay, let's see where this does go. And whether I take that talking at the conference, one-to-one with my friends, one size fits all. It's not like, oh, well, I need to be a bit different. What do I need to? And I really think it's that presence of love that allows our mind chatter to still. And even if it's just for 1 second, 1 minute, whatever, our personal mind slows down and everything that we truly are is felt in that moment. That's where people change from. That's their inner compass. So people wake up that they've had it all along. It's not buried in the black hole cupboard that we throw everything into. It's not been given to somebody else. It doesn't exist anywhere else but inside. And from that inside, all bets are off where life can take us once we realize that we're not damaged or broken. And it's interesting because what I saw from that client this morning was that when we do not even judge things as being that's bad and this is good, because when we bad, we have an agenda of what bad needs to feel like, and then we get lost in that agenda. But when we just see, like where I was speaking this morning, and it's like when we really see inside ourselves what that feeling of love is like for us, we're in the fullness of life. We're truly in the fullness of all the experiences that is good and wonderful. And that's something back in the days that I thought had to be difficult to change. Because it's how we look at it. When we just look around, everything seems that it has to be suffering or struggling. And we know something that that's not true. We know something that allows us to know that our inner compass, our instincts, our wisdom, whatever we want to call it, once we hear that within ourselves, and if you'd have told me at the beginning when that client turned up, fraught with anxiety, that we would end up laughing about an Elvis impersonator and how wonderful he was, I'd have bet you money that wouldn't have happened in a session. But our art of just being together and truly just being in that space is what I see happens. And then it doesn't become about what Steve is saying or what Steve is pointing to, it's how they're hearing. And that's the transformation. And that word, because I hear myself saying that, and we don't really need to be transformed. Because that spiritual formless energy of who we truly are, if it's not damaged or broken, And it's more to be a guide for us rather than something that needs to be repaired. And that's what I see wake people up. And we see it in spring. It wakes nature up. We don't have to tell the remote control of life how to make nature do what nature does. Nature does it beautifully. And if we sit back and watch, we're not that different. So we don't need a remote control for us to be peace of mind, for us to be happy, for us to be joyful. They're innately at every fiber of our being. And when we just look more in that direction, we don't see things like sadness or worry or concern. They can still be there in the experience of life, but it just means that we give it less attention. That's what I find. It's not saying, oh, come along and erase everything or forget everything that you've done. Life and what looks like all these experiences are things that are actually happening. And this is not, and I remember working with someone at the beginning and them saying that, like, you know, are you telling me that I have to get rid of my anger? And I says, my friend, we're not telling you anything. All we're showing you is something of how our psychological experiences is created. And he says, good, because my anger has got me through everything that I have been through. And I says, well, that's good. And then by the end of it was a 3-day long weekend we were doing. And by the end of it, he'd said, you know, I want to say something. He says, because I was waiting on Steve saying that I had to let go of my anger. And I got more angry waiting on him telling me that I had to let go of my anger. And he didn't. He just told me that I just had to just be aware of where I enjoyed being in that feeling or not. And I didn't enjoy being in the feeling, but it got me through. But I've realized that I only make it up because my anger's never been the same. Sometimes I felt anger because of this. Sometimes I felt it because of that. So anger's not the same. It's just how I make it up. It looks the same. And I was like, okay, you're my teacher now. There's that expression. He jumped the boundaries of times. And it was like, now you're seeing it more clearer than I do. And that's the great thing about just being curious. Curious about ourselves, curious about life, curious about the experience of everything. Is that we don't get into the details of why we need to make ourselves a certain way. We just be with the experience in the moment and see where that takes us. That's where I see people have changed from, because they grab their moment, just like that guy saying, do I have to let go? And that was a big thing, because I remember my immediate was like, boy, but if you see that you're creating that in the moment, your life is never going to be the same. And he saw that. So the reason why I'm sharing that is like, and you know, we don't know what's really going to happen until the moment arrives. But I guess that's where we'll all be coming from over the conference. It's not that we're telling you that you have to behave a certain way. You're accepted, warts and all. You're beloved, warts and all. So you don't have to come and be anything other than. And that's where I think every person out there sharing is really coming from, that gift of allowing people to see that when they embrace who they are in the moment, we're just the magic of love and wisdom at play is new and bringing new all the time. So I've gone around the houses, which I apologise to answer your question. But
just sit back and let you talk. Do you have another question? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, you go on. You can go.
Okay, so I've got another question. I'm really aware that there's a lot of kind of online resources around this understanding. So whether people are new to it or they've been around it for a while, there's a lot of online stuff available. So I think if I was, you know, if I wasn't running the conference and I was thinking about getting a ticket, my question might be, why would I come to a 3-day conference, you know, travel to Devon, join in for 3 days when there's lots of stuff I could see online? What about a conference or, you know, that kind of thing might engage people rather than perhaps an online stuff? Yeah.
you know, A, it's Devon. B, it's with you guys. See, it's with us. What else do you want? No. You know, it is so, it is so true. Yeah, no, there you go. Can I get a free ticket for that? No, there is such a lot of wonderful resources out there, but there is nothing to beat, I think, when you're in a group setting. You know, one of the words we speak about is consciousness, and at the end of the day, one thing I'm very clear about is you are your own best teacher. And when we talk about being of service, it's self-service. It starts with self. But for me, when I go along, it's because there is something about, like, we're all the same. There is no separation, really, in our true nature of love. So it might not just be the speaker. It'll say something and you'll get insight. It could be the breaks in between. It could be passing someone going for a loo break. It could be whatever. The whole 3 days, the whole conference is designed for you to find or understand or uncover what we're pointing to. And it might not happen over the weekend, but one of the things is that when you bring the intent of having a collective consciousness together, something special happens. And I think when there's laughter also, which I am sure there'll be by the bucket load, but there's also going to be quiet time. So the weekend is designed for you. Now, as much as online resources can be fantastic, I don't think you can actually beat going along and sitting. And I always find it fascinating who you end up sitting beside. And 9 times out of 10, you get so much in like, oh my God, we could be neighbours, we could be friends, because, and it's just always really curious that you sit beside someone and you end up just having the time of your life, just talking to them. So that's where it's really good if you come on your own also. You might, I can't remember that saying, but as much as that every stranger is a friend you're just about to meet. And I think that's the wonderful thing about the conference, is that there won't be that. If you want to be on your own, people will honour that. And some people do have that style. They just want to go listen and then go, and that will be honoured. But if you don't, then you can come along and just be in that day as it's been set up. I get to experience it for you as your own best teacher and answer questions live. Get to know the speakers live. And one of the things is we put up last year, and I guess it will be the same this year, was that even though we'll be speaking, there was still plenty of gaps in between, that if someone wanted to go and speak to someone, they could speak face-to-face live there and then. So it's not just about, okay, the whole weekend is for you, or the 3 days. And that's why I would say come along to this conference. That's why I'm going along to it as well, because I'm still,
okay, Steve,
I'm still there too.
We want to be in that room.
Yeah, same reason for us. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
and that's the beauty. Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it. Is like, I know the wonderful speakers that's coming along, that none of us think that we're better than anybody else. Well, maybe sometimes. No, none of us think that. So we're all on a level playing field. And that's the great thing about it. And when you come along to the conference, you'll really get that sense that we're not there just because we're speakers as being somebody. It's just that perhaps we've seen something, but like what I explained, just out of the blue, someone can become your teacher. Someone can hear something and just start speaking about life in such a way. And we saw that last year at the conference. We saw that the amount of people that did come in with a little bit of kind of serious faces, and then it was, oh my God, you've got a facelift. Oh my God, you're really laughing from the belly again. And that was just because they were waking up. They were no longer hypnotizing themselves by their overthinking. And they were just being in the moment. And that's what we're pointing to, is a natural ability to be that way. And what's great about a conference is you get that experience to just spend the first day, the second day, and the third day, never knowing when insight of who you are will arrive and give you clarity in the moment to see life a little bit differently, or really differently. And that's the great thing. And when I went along to I was a big deep searcher before, and I used to go along to like retreats and different stuff, and it get to the last day and I'd go really low in my mood because of, oh my God, I've just got to go back into life again now. What I love about going along to conferences, it's like, wow, I can't wait to get out now and actually share just how I feel and where I've been. And that's completely different. That it doesn't end after our 3 days. It continues for you. And I know you guys have wonderful resources, especially for the people around the area that you actually live. But I know you're going out into online as well. So then they can listen to online resources. But, I don't think there's anything special special at the beginning. I don't think there's anything than coming along and just being and being supported. And also it gets to that if anybody's curious about you guys and what you're actually doing, that's a perfect place to see. Because we've got friends staying with us at the moment, and obviously I was telling them I have this webinar, and they were saying about last year, and I says I was really pleasantly surprised because I've heard the girls speak. I know Deb's because the very first conference I went to, Deb's was there. But wow, when they were on that stage, it's like, who swapped them around? Because it just you really showed that, you know, when we say that you're living from the principles. That's to me our true nature, is when we see when life comes up that we think that we can't go anywhere but down, and we feel something inside of us awaken and taking us through that experience. You spoke from such a clear, deep place that I was like, you know, if I lived in that place, I definitely would be hanging out with you guys. Because it wasn't just like, this is a good idea for us to do. This sounds like fun. It is, and I know that's why you guys are also doing it. But it's also because you know, like all the speakers that's been there, we have got truth when we speak about our experiences. So we're not going to hear anything that perhaps we haven't heard before, whether in our own life or whether it's been in the clients that we've actually worked with. But the difference, what it will be, is because we're all uniquely divine, then we get to hear that. We get to hear the health inside of them. And that's what becomes exciting when you see everybody turn up at a conference at the beginning, and then before we know it, someone who maybe looked like they had the weight of the world on their shoulders is laughing harder than you, smiling brighter than you, and it just fills you up. Because we just know that they're just in the magic of where they are, nowhere to get to, but just being in that moment. And again, I don't think you can beat going along and getting that experience.
Thank you. That's lovely. Mandy, so the lovely Mandy who is here with us as well, she is another one of our amazing speakers. I wonder if you'd got any question or anything that you wanted to ask Steve, or anything you would like to share. No,
I wasn't expecting to speak, but yeah. So I wasn't at last year's conference, but heard so much about it. And I think it's funny because it's that conference word, isn't it? It felt more like a gathering of people. And I love what you say, Steve, about there's no hierarchy, there's no kind of, and I'm sure that all the speakers were in the room with everybody else all the time. It's not like the speakers get bussed in and then go into the green room and wait for their next turn. It all just feels really ordinary. And I think that's one of the things that I love doing. I love working with ordinary people, and we're all ordinary. But it has an ordinary feel to it. It's nothing special, even though it's remarkable, if that makes sense. So it's lack of kind of ego. That's what I feel. It's not like come along and learn something. It's just come and have a gathering, come and kind of hang out. But I'm also interested, Steve, I think, in, I suppose because it's particularly around mental health. That's the title, isn't it? And I'd love to know a bit about your experience of working with people. I don't even use the word mental health now, but you know, people who maybe feel that they're not in their mental health, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how you think this could make a difference? Yeah.
That's a really good question. And I love the idea of the gathering, Mandy, because it really did feel like it was a gathering. And that's what's got me going back again this year to be a presenter. You know, it's really interesting because since 1991, I've been working in a therapeutic field. And not once in all the trainings that I've done was I ever told about the health of a person. It was a sickness. So I think when we look at our mental health or our psychology, we can see where I used the word before, definition. And when I was speaking to a client the other day, and they said something about themselves, and all that came out of me was like, yeah, I think like that sometimes. And they just looked at me and they says, do you? And I said, yeah. I says, I have thoughts that doesn't feel helpful at times, and sometimes I take them more serious than what I do. I says, but you know the difference now, I says, is that I know that I'm doing it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to stop immediately, but I know that I'm not pushing up the hill anymore. And that's the difference. I know that there is health there. And I know that at times it can be helpful to think, well, I'm just overthinking. But when we start seeing, is like, what we're not talking about is all the times that you think you've done wrong, all the times that you think that you've not been good enough, all the times that perhaps bad things have happened to you. Our gathering is to actually look at your mental health, to speak to your mental health. And a wonderful, I think, is a very simple metaphor that I heard at the beginning, and I've heard it used many a times, is the sun in the sky. And if we look at the sun in the sky as being our true mental health, and the clouds that pass it by are our thinking or our thoughts. And so we know that even when it's a dark, cloudy day, the sun is still shining there. It never goes away. So our mental health is the sun. It never goes away. But innocently, sometimes we try to push it. I was working with a client today, and they were saying, you know, I've got very good at, when I know that I'm in a state of anxiety, that I start doing things to keep myself busy. And I keep trying, and I'll do this and I'll do that. And all that came out of me was, stop trying. And they just sat back and they went, oh my God, because it's the trying, it's making me more stressed. And I was like, oh my God, so it is. Now, that was just a very simple conversation, but they saw that for themselves. Now, I wasn't looking for what they got to do to get better with their anxiety, because I think what we do is, like, when we innocently have a thought, and thought is neutral when it comes into our experience, and it's what we put on the experience that becomes personal to us, and what we resist persists. So if we keep trying to get away from it, then it looks more real. And the more real that it looks, the more we feel it. And then we get lost in our feelings. And then it's no longer about what we think it's about. It's about all the other times that we felt that. So no wonder we feel we're hypnotized. No wonder we feel delirious. No wonder we feel stressed. But when we see that that's not the health that we're talking about, that's the clouds in the sky, it looks like it's covering up our sun. To me, that's night and day different. When I sit in front of someone and I know that they have the same health inside of them as I do, that shocks them. Well, you mean even though I've spoke from people who've been in prisons, I spoke with female survivors of domestic violence, I've run groups with them, a man running for female. One size fits all, I truly believe, when it comes to this. I've worked in mental health teams, I've worked with the street homeless, I've worked with so many variety of people, and it all comes down to the same, that we're all resting in mental health. We're all resting in mental health. And that's what I know. And already in the few moments that you were sharing, Mandy, is I love how you were saying it. And it was just so, well, it's just, and that's how I see life now. It doesn't have to be complicated until I make it. And I see that I make it, and I see that other people make it. But it's not about us saying, oh, well, you've got to do this or you've got to do that. It's when people start seeing for themselves that inner compass, peace of mind, whatever we want to call it, is always open and free, bringing new thought into our experience. And what I said at the beginning, our suffering is in our mental health. That's what it looks like. Well, I can't be healthy if I'm suffering. And what I've realized is that I've gone out some of the days feeling really low because of maybe a traumatic thing happening, and I've got through the day. And that taught me something. That I just saw what I went in and out of thought. I judged that before. It had to be either this way or that way. And when I just see that when you're standing watching the river from the side, you don't look at one specific part of that river. You just see the vastness of it all. And we'll have a spectrum of emotions. And when we stop innocently getting lost in defining what it means and getting lost in that defining, the product is we feel our health.
Mm.
We feel the health. It's inside us all along. And that, for me, is what clears everything in our front experience of life, thinking that that's the only thing. I thought it was me. It changed me. I thought it was an exercise or a meditation and everything like that can be of use in some way. But when I saw was like, my goodness, when I had an insight or when I just saw that, don't do it then, Steve. And something inside of me heard that. And even though people had been telling me, that my partner had been saying for months, well, maybe don't do that. I mean, I'm going back years ago, but it was like, well, don't tell me what to do. So I was arguing with help that I was getting because it looked like everything was outside of me. And I had no control out of that. And how dare they say that I've got no control? I know that already. So then I was just adding to the bonfire of experience. And what happens? You get more hot, you get more anxious, you get more, and then it just looks like you're all consumed in this great tower of fear or whatever. But what I saw was I light the match. I flicked the lighter to light it in the first place. I didn't know that before. So I've become my own best friend. I'm my own best enemy at times, at moments. And that could be simply from when I need to eat or when I need to sleep, or maybe I have been. But it's just knowing, you know, that wonderful expression, this too shall pass. It's just knowing that I don't know when it will, but I know it will because it's how we're designed. And I think we've innocently forgotten how we're designed. And I think we see it in the beauty of children going through one emotion to the next. And that's what we're pointing to. To me, that's where mental health is. This is I once heard someone say it's redefining mental health. It's looking at the true health of the person rather than the sickness. And I'm all for that.
Yeah. It's definitely what we're going to spend.
I think I see it as normalizing as well, which is helping people to see their experience as normal. Yeah. And that's so reassuring.
Yeah.
And it's infinitely practical as well. It's not kind of woo-woo. It's not anything that we don't already know, as you were saying. And it's just helps us understand, make sense of life. It helps us understand what's going on.
Beautiful, yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I want to come and listen to you, Mandy.
Yeah. Yeah. Say nothing.
Well, I think that was beautiful. I think you shared some amazing things there, Steve. I think that was absolutely wonderful. And yeah, I can't wait to have our meet speaker with Mandy and hear what she's got to say as well. We've had a very high bar set with them, Denise and Steve. So
yeah, very high. But can I just add that one of the things that I love, and people will find this at the gathering conference, that the speakers aren't all singing off the same hymn sheet.
Yeah,
we all show up as our unique individual selves, and I love that. You know, it's life expressing itself through each one of us differently.
Yeah,
and that's so exciting, I think. Yeah, which is why I love listening to other speakers.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got an amazing array of different speakers, you know, men and women, and different people with different experiences working in different arenas. But we're all kind of talking about the same understanding, but yet it will be talked about very differently. And you just never know who is going to connect with who. You know, you go there thinking, oh, this person's the best speaker, and someone else is listening to someone else. So we very much tried to do that, get an array of different people to share this in different ways to appeal to different people. So yeah, it's going to be an amazing 3 days, and I just can't wait.
Me too.
So shall we wrap that up this evening?
I think that's a
otherwise we'll be
place.
talking all night.
We'll be talking until the conference.
Yeah. Easily done.
Yeah.
A good place to finish. Thanks ever so much, Steve. That's been really, really nice.
It's been beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And we will make
My
sure
pleasure.
wherever you're watching this recording, hopefully there will be links around to find out where to get a ticket and to find out more about Steve and more about Mandy, probably, and Earth. And hopefully we will see you at the conference. Take care, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.